Hello and welcome. I am going to be talking today with two women about a really important topic and one that affects, I've learned, about 1 out of 4 families. We're talking about pregnancy after loss. It might be loss from a miscarriage, a stillbirth, might be loss of a child who isn't born totally healthy or normal in developmental ways. So a lot of folks have this kind of family. I know I do. So with me, first of all, on the left here is Cindy Deiger. And Cindy is the mother of a boy named Tom or Tommy who lived to be 38, was told at early time for you that he may not even live to birth, correct?
Correct.
So Cindy's, since she had Tommy, had 2 more boys, and we're going to talk with her some about what it's been like for the brothers to have a special needs child. And Joann, my other guest, is a really internationally known author and researcher and pregnancy after loss specialist.
Yep.
And if you watch the show for years or occasionally throughout the years, you may have seen Joann because she's been one of my favorite guests from way back.
Thanks,
so
Mary.
Welcome back.
Thanks.
And welcome, Cindy.
Thank you.
You've written 3 books now, Joann, and the most recent one, Born into Loss. I love that title. Just tell us a little bit about the basics in terms of what your goal was when you wrote this book.
Well, actually, it came from the video that we made called Pregnancy Following Loss, and people in the audience would come up and say, oh my God, I was that child. And so they would start talking about being the child in the family born after a child that had died. So I went back to IRB and got permission to interview adults who were the child in their family born after loss. And it's been a really amazing wake-up about the impact of what it meant. I also want to say being carried in a womb of a mother that's grieving the loss of a baby, and then coming into the world not so sure if they're their own individual child. And then in another presentation, one of the people that videotaped it was a webinar, came up to me and said, I have to talk to you because my parents were the same way, only my brother lived and he has special needs. So that's how in our new book, Shadows of a Deceased Sibling, has a special chapter on siblings alive who had a special needs child first. And nobody talks about that.
Not much. Mm-mm. And nobody talks much about being the sibling of a child who was not able to live.
Right. It impacts the whole family.
Definitely. And when we say 1 out of 4, I mean, that's a lot of us.
1 out of 3 pregnancies, and then 3% of pregnancies have special needs children, yeah.
I want to give you a few more statistics that I learned from you folks that I had not known. African American women have about 4 times the number of losses. That I did not know. And 26,000 stillbirths in our country in a year. And that's a lot of stillbirths.
It is.
And one of the things we were talking about earlier is that in our country there are very few rituals that people have when there is a loss after a pregnancy that may have seemed normal. We don't even hardly let people take time off work.
Well, that is an issue, but I think there's many rituals now because of the work that's being done in the different organizations, and much more done at the hospitals to give the families footprints, handprints, a lock of hair, and to hold the baby, because 50, 60 years ago, in the new book we wrote, that I wrote, those parents didn't get anything. Some of them didn't even get to see their babies. So that's gotten much, much better.
That almost seems inhumane, doesn't it now?
Yes, but they thought they were protecting the mother.
Right, I'm sure. Yeah, it's a hard call maybe, but and then the statistic that really ties into the topic here tonight, the number of families who go on to have another child after a loss is huge.
Yeah, the research says about 80% do, but unfortunately, health care for the pregnancy that follows loss has only started to change maybe in the last 5 to 6 years. Now there are more, they call rainbow clinics, which I don't really like that term, and a lot of parents don't either, but that's what they're called because they do need special care. Everybody thinks, oh, they're pregnant again, they're going to be happy, they're finally going to stop grieving.
Yeah.
And actually what happens is a whole new layer of grief comes up because they think, oh my God, this baby could die too. And if people want me to forget this baby, the past baby, then what does that mean for this baby? So yeah, there's a lot that goes in it.
A lot of dynamics we're just ignorant about. And for the father too, I read somewhere that the father felt more anxious about the subsequent pregnancy, thinking, could my wife also lose her life?
Because that has happened where
Sure.
the mother has been in intensive care. And you know, when I was researching the fathers and their pregnancy following loss, it was very interesting because I interviewed the mothers separate from the dads, and just about every dad said, you're the first person that's asked me how I feel.
Really?
And the mothers would say, oh, he's so supportive, he's so wonderful. And he would say, I just tell her, I'm just as scared as she is, but I feel like a hypocrite. I don't want her to know how scared I am too.
Oh,
So dads are very often the partners, not just the dads, but the partner is just very often overlooked.
so if we're this kind of new into understanding all the dynamics in our country, are there any countries in the world that are doing well in this area?
I don't think so. Have you heard?
No.
I mean, I'm pretty involved with the researchers in the other area, and we're only just now doing much more. There's a whole organization, International Stillbirth Association and Star Legacy that I'm involved in, which their whole area is research and education to prevent stillbirth.
So the answer is no, we don't have
We don't have enough, that's for sure.
enough, and other countries aren't doing enough. You brought a picture of Tommy, and
I
I'd
did.
love to have you share it with the viewers too. He looks like such a charmer.
Very much a charmer. Very
Is that
much.
a good word for
Yes.
a descriptive word?
He loved people. He loved being around people. But
Can you tip it maybe
Oh.
there like that?
that better?
Perfect.
Yeah.
Yeah, Tom's beginnings were real difficult, and he wasn't expected to survive delivery. And the night before he was born, we made funeral arrangements. That's how difficult a picture they painted for us. But he didn't need all of the interventions, and he remained in the NICU for probably 3 weeks. He was 10.5 pounds,
Oh
and
my
next to all
goodness.
those preemies, he looked like he should get up and walk.
Wow. I bet.
But it was a struggle, but he presented to us a spirit of, I'm here. I'm gonna rattle the world, and let's just see where the ride takes us. And it was a ride. It was a beautiful ride. It was a bumpy ride, but a beautiful, happy young man who doctors felt would never see his first birthday. And
And he lived to be 38.
38.
Right?
Yep.
How long ago did he die, Cindy?
2 years.
2
Two
years.
2.5 years. Yeah.
It must still be a raw kind of a
It's
feeling.
his little body just wore out. In his journey, he had close to 60 surgeries.
Oh my.
Some orthopedics due to his disabilities, but most of it was infections, and his little body was just wearing out, and nobody predicted 38 years. So it was a great ride, a great ride.
So the sense of gratitude that he was able to extend his life way beyond
Oh, yes.
what you,
Yes.
you were afraid of.
Yeah, and we as his parents, his late father and I, didn't put terms on, he's not going to see his first birthday. Let's not get too attached, because we were advised not to get too attached when he was born,
really?
because it was expected to be such a short life, and I remember very rudely saying to a doctor, you don't understand, we were in love with this package of a child, the thought of a child, before we even knew we were pregnant. So it wasn't easy. There were hard days, but there were very, very joyful journey with this young man. And no regrets.
That's something that a lot of the viewers and a lot of the public probably wouldn't get, really.
Right.
Because they would feel maybe pity or how can you do it, how can you manage,
Yeah.
that kind of thing.
When he was still in the NICU, there was people brought to his bedside in anticipation that we weren't going to take him home with us.
Oh.
Because his health issues were so extensive and prognosis was so poor that the assumption was that who could possibly take care of this young man, this little baby. And yet he didn't come home on oxygen. That wasn't a need. Feeding was difficult, but we persevered, and there were several suggestions he should have a feeding tube at a young age, and we're like, well, he eats. He loves eating, and he was thriving. He was gaining weight, not meeting developmental milestones, but yet he did meet developmental milestones because he was very aware of his surroundings. He interacted. We had a mainstream through his entire educational career. And
Oh, wow.
yeah.
Wow.
That's interesting that they said that, because so many people, when a baby dies, say, well, at least you didn't know the baby. At least you weren't attached to that baby. Not understanding that, of course they were. They're still parents to that baby.
Yeah.
Right.
Which
And
is why
you celebrate the uniqueness of the child.
Yeah.
And each child is unique, for
Yeah.
sure, right?
We were often described as a disabled family, as a group. All of us were clustered together, and we were quick to tell people that we were a family of 5, mom, dad, 3 sons, and one happened to be in a wheelchair. And the focus of Tom's life was always that Tom was a whole person, and he was a brother, he was a son, he was a cousin, and he happened to have disabilities, and he had chronic health issues. So a lot of Tom's challenges were very apparent looking at him, but it didn't take people long. They spent just a few minutes with him and they realized he knew what was going on. He wasn't able to communicate it, but he knew what was going on, and he loved being around people.
Well, it's wonderful to hear.
It made our support easier.
Yes. And your focus on the siblings really
The
ties
siblings,
in here.
yeah.
I mean, I'm really now curious, and maybe you could even ask her some more pertinent questions than I would, Joann, in terms of how your other 2 sons dealt with this. Obviously, you and your husband did a super job, but do you want to throw in a question or 2?
Well, I think it's interesting in interviewing one of the brothers, how sensitive and caring they became and were such advocates for Tom. And their
Very much.
friends were Tom's friends too.
Yes.
You know,
Yes.
they'd come in and say, so where's Tom today, and what's
Yeah.
Tom doing? And always worried when he was in the hospital, if
Yeah.
he was going to be okay.
And
And this is the friends of your sons?
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
my sons learned, and their friends did, at a young age that, gosh, having a brother in a wheelchair brought you all kinds of advantages. The one time we went to Disney, because you were in a wheelchair, you got moved to you went in through the exit and then they threaded you into the line, so we didn't have to wait. There was a local theater by our home that if an individual came with a care attendant, they both got in free. So that was always a good thing.
Sure.
And we always had a vehicle for Tom's mobility for his wheelchair, and once they acquired their license, there was more mobility, so there was a good reason to go to the gaming store because you could use the van and take Tom with. Whether Tom was interested in it, they learned pretty early on that there were perks to their brother, and it was fun to see their relationships evolve. But they entered into this family that was their normal.
Do they want to pursue careers that are in the caring spectrum area?
One of my sons went to school for digital video production.
Oh, right.
And his first job was at Children's Hospital in Star Studio. And it was, to him, it was like going home because they were very comfortable at Children's. Tom was in and out of the hospital all the time. And that was Ben's happy place.
It was almost a second
Yeah.
place to hang out, right?
Well, and he
Yeah.
entered into that environment with a foundational level of empathy that he understood what the families were going through and what kids with chronic health issues maybe explored their environment different. So Ben was pretty instrumental in having a focus on let's make sure all kids can do it. And it was, he enjoyed his time there. And they both are very empathetic and caring men.
Which is a fabulous trait, isn't it,
Yeah,
for a
very
young
proud
man?
of them. Very proud of them.
As you hear Cindy describing her family, when we talk about the other categories of loss, are there some major differences, or are there mostly similarities?
I would say that's an interesting question because in all of the people that I've interviewed, even adults who had a very traumatic childhood, possibly because their parents were alcoholic, at the end of each interview I always say, what would you like parents raising children after a loss to know? And they all universally said that kids matter. Even this very difficult adult who was raised by alcoholic families. So, and the other thing that's so important for families that are pregnant after a loss is that they're still parents to that deceased child. So we work really hard in helping them understand they can continue their parenting relationship with their deceased child and still embrace a new baby coming, because the new baby needs them now to pay attention. So
one of the things I've wondered about is the statistics are really pretty grim in terms of how marriages survive a major loss. And it wouldn't necessarily be of a child or having a special needs, but not good statistics for couples because people grieve so differently.
that's true. But I have not, I mean, I've been doing this work for almost 40 years, and we've only had maybe 3 divorces in all the many, many families.
Really?
And most of them were related to alcoholism.
Really?
So,
Well, that's very,
because people worry about that.
Yeah.
You know, that's the first
Sure.
thing. Oh, I've heard the statistics that if you don't, you know, when your baby dies, the chances of having a divorce are high, but not when they get really good support, which is part of what Star Legacy does. They have support groups for pregnancy after loss, infant loss, a special one just for fathers, and then we have a twice-a-month grandparent group, which is another whole
I didn't
area.
see that listed in the,
Yeah, that is huge because the grandparents suffer 2 losses, their grandchild and the loss of their adult child, who will never be the same again.
that's true.
It's an amazing group, and I love facilitating it. All they really do is open it up, and they take over. Just finding somebody that understands.
Yeah.
Because they lose friends, too.
Sure.
You know, one grandparent said, "You're still talking about that baby? It's been over a year.
Yeah.
Can't you get over it?" But the continued bond stays for them, too.
part of the grieving is loss of what could be.
Yes.
And that's a complex loss, isn't it?
Yeah, it can be.
Well, I'm now a grandma, and twins, boy and girl twins, and I can see, it's just amazing to see my son be a father. And they were born early, but everything went great. And it brought me full circle to when my Tom was born. I had 5 other family members that were expecting, all at the same time. And Tom was the first one, and I remember my mom being very worried about the subsequent pregnancies, but more worried about the status of our family because Tom's prognosis was so poor. And she didn't tell me till years later how worried she was that he would not have lived and how that was going to impact the 5 that were born after he was, and the emotional pull it had that here they'd be holding healthy babies and I potentially wasn't going to have my baby, and being my first pregnancy.
And they might feel guilty.
Yes.
That
Yes.
survivor's guilt, right?
Yeah.
I mean, the more we talk about this topic, the more I realize this is a very multi-layered
It is.
topic, isn't it? Maybe I'll have to have you two back and we'll continue on. I want to hear a little bit more about born into loss because we only have about 4 minutes left. Can you tell us, some about the other things that you felt were crucial to share?
Well, I think there's, in the chapters in the different books, there's really some adults who felt like they were a replacement child, and others who felt like they were just so wanted and loved that they didn't feel that way at all. And again, I said almost all of them are in helping professions. One of them's a bishop, another one's an oncologist, who they're not afraid to approach people that are grieving. And that starts at a very young age. Parents, when I'm talking, researching with parents who are raising these children, they're the first person that will go up to a new person in class and say, "Hi, my name is Amy, and I want to be your friend."
That's great.
And they are also reaching out to special needs kids because they know that not everybody gets to
they're
bring
often
friends.
ignored.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
So,
Okay, so that's just a few of the differences that you've come upon.
that, and there's another chapter on the adults becoming parents. And I always wonder about that when you told me you were going to be a grandparent, because that's a really interesting chapter that talks about what it was like to be a bereaved grandmother to a child that died years ago, now watching their kids have kids. And
What is kind of the outcome for that person?
it's interesting because some people decide they don't want to have kids because they know what their parents went through, and others, the parents just hold back and never let them know how anxious they are. So, yeah, it's a
Interesting.
very interesting chapter on the different scenarios that they go through.
We're going to hold up Born into Loss first here, and you'll get a look at the cover. And then the book before this was?
Different Baby, Different Story, which is my research with the parents raising children during their pregnancy and raising children. And then the first one was Meeting the Needs of Parents Pregnant and Parenting After Loss. And that's how healthcare providers can do intervention during each of the pregnancies.
And are they doing it in a much better way now than they used to?
I'm hoping they are.
I would assume they are, because when Tom was born, other than addressing the medical part, there was nothing for myself and my late husband. Nothing. And we kind of had to find our way. And there wasn't a lot of people to talk to.
Did you have the chance to bring in professionals who could help with some of the more intricate healthcare needs of Tom?
I would say we didn't have the choice. In his early years, we weren't given the choices of there's this support, there's that kind of a support. We had to kind of dig it up on our own.
Oh, wow.
Yeah,
That becomes a huge
yeah,
challenge.
yeah. And the first time I met Joann was when Tom's was entering into a developmental learning center. And that was the first we knew of any insight on what could be done to better support him.
You know, we are out of time all of a sudden. On that note, we'll have to stop. But I want to mention, Joann had mentioned it earlier, starlegacyfoundation.org. You can go to that website and learn more about what they are doing and lots of good things. Joann's books are available via Amazon. So that's a wonderful resource. And I want to thank you both for coming down and
It's always great to be
sharing
here.
Yeah,
and
thank you. Thank you very much.
helping me learn more, helping the viewers learn more. We really need to do another part 2, I think.
Okay.
Thank you for joining us. I'll be back again next week. Until then, have a good week.